So we're recording again. So the brain is organized with neurons. You have certain portions like your occipital cortex, which is the visual cortex. You have the regulation of hearing, the auditory cortex. The nucleus is cell bodies that have a discrete location in the brain. Gray matter is covering the brain. The white matter is the bundles of axons that have fatty insulation that helps control how quickly information is carried around the brain. So groupings of cell bodies outside the central nervous system are called ganglia. Nerves are bundles of axons supported by connective tissue. Spinal nerves carry information to and from the spinal cord. Cranial nerves, which we'll learn about, there are 12 cranial nerves involved in information to and from the brain. So let's look at the nervous system again. The peripheral nervous system has cell bodies outside the central nervous system. There are bundles of nerves that carry information to and from the spinal cord. Much of that information is automatic. So the neural cortex is gray matter on the surface of the brain. White matter is below that. Nuclei are discrete areas that have a boundary that help function. For instance, the occipital cortex is for sight. You have around the ear the auditory cortex. So you have all the various centers of the brain that receive information and also send out tracks that are bundles of axons in the CNS, columns that run up and down the spinal cord that carry information from the body and send out information in response. So sensory input is called an ascending pathway. Motor output, where information from the sensory world has been processed, and our response is the motor response. So ascending pathways carry information to the brain and spinal cord. Descending pathways up and down the spinal cord are constantly sending out information for muscle contraction, posture, digestion, breathing, bladder control, and so on. Every nerve cell, every muscle cell, and all cells have what's called a resting potential. The body pumps negative charge or maintains the inside of the nerve or cell, muscle cell, is negative compared to the outside, maintained by the sodium potassium pump. It has a resting voltage of minus 70 millivolts. Voltage is also called potential. Voltage measures differences in charge. The inside of the nerve, inside of muscle cells, or have excess negative charge that makes the inside of the nerve cell and muscle cell negative compared to the outside. So if we take a nerve, so for instance, we took a frog, cut the sciatic nerve out of its leg, put it in a chamber that kept it moist, and had recording electrodes, one inserted into the nerve and another on the outside. So you have to have recording of the activity of the nerve and one other electrode, that's the ground electrode. So we can measure that the inside of the nerve is negative compared to positive on the outside. There are positive charges pumped out of the nerve and other charges pumped back into the nerve. So potassium is going to be pumped in. It takes energy. One of the main reasons we eat is to make sure that we have energy to keep the inside of our nerves negative compared to the outside. All activity, glandular secretion, heartbeat, muscle activity, digestion, respiration, breathing, all of those depend upon messages that can move along a nerve because the inside is negative compared to the outside. So we're going to have different channels. We're going to have channels that let in sodium and allow out potassium. So the cytosol has a different ionic concentration, meaning it has different distributions of potassium, sodium. Proteins are negative and stay in the cell, but the body actively maintains the inside negative, and by opening various conduits or pipes that allow substances to move in and out of cells, we're able to create electrical signals, action potentials, voltage changes that allow messages to move along nerves, allow muscles to contract, to allow our postural muscles to allow us to learn to sit down and to walk and talk and crawl on our belly like a reptile. Most people don't do that, but we could if we wanted. Okay. So how is the action potential, which is a change in voltage, which moves along the neuron? So we have this inside of the cell being negative 70 millivolts based upon stimulation of the nerve cell. We're going to have what's called depolarization, where the inside of the nerve becomes positive. Sodium channels allow movement of sodium into the cell. Then the sodium channels close, and repolarization is when the nerve is reset, and there's a hyperpolarization so that the nerve is ready to send a message again. So imagine you're looking at the screen, and changes in voltage, changes in release of neurotransmitter are constantly happening in your retina, and that information is sent to your occipital cortex, the visual cortex at the back of your head, and you can see you have an auditory cortex taking in sounds that you analyze and recognize. So we have sodium channels. What first thing happens, sodium channel opens, then it's closing, and then potassium channel is opening. So sodium flowed in, potassium flows out. It's a very, very small amount of sodium ions or potassium ions, but the change in the voltage or the membrane potential, changes in voltage happen constantly. They happen as I speak this morning, as the muscles involved in generation of speech, information is being constantly sent to allow my tongue muscles to function, and I've been able to learn vocabulary and expression. So the nervous system, by changing what goes into the cell, when it comes out, it changes the voltage, and that leads to signals that are sent all over the body. The action potential jumps in saltatory conduction, and continuous propagation occurs in nerves that are not covered by a fatty myelinated covering. So those nerves conduct information more slowly, but the action potential means the electrical changes in nerve cells that tell your sweat glands to release sweat, tell your digestion to start processing food, tells various glands in your body to release their hormones, which are involved in long-term changes, growth, bone development, muscle development. So your endocrine system is responding to long-term changes, and your nervous system responds quickly to minute-by-minute changes. Okay, let's stop there and let's record this, stop recording.